There is a subtle moment in a man's development when he begins to notice something odd about the world around him, a quiet discrepancy, a difference in how he responds to people and how people respond to him. There is no drama in this realization, no rebellious intention, no emotional rupture, simply awareness. The awareness that most human beings seem to derive meaning from sources that do not resonate with him. They seek approval the way thirsty plants seek water, bending toward whichever light will acknowledge their existence. They speak not to express truth, but to guarantee belonging. They move in groups because groups provide insulation from internal doubt. But then there are the others, a much smaller fraction of men who do not bend toward that same light. They do not require the constant reflection of themselves in the eyes of another. They do not need the audience. They do not lean outward when the world becomes uncertain. They lean inward. And when this man begins to see this within himself, society sometimes calls him the Sigma, a convenient shorthand for a psychological pattern, but the term is merely symbolic. The reality is deeper. The Sigma is not separate. Because he refuses to join society, he is separate. Because the motivations that govern society do not govern him. He is not performing disinterest. He simply does not hunger for what others hunger for. And because he does not hunger for it, he cannot be manipulated by it. That alone makes him unusual. Because the normal man lives under invisible emotional supply chains, validation, comparison, approval, competition, and positioning. The Sigma does not. This lack of dependency places him outside the emotional economy that guides most behavior. That is why he appears different, not louder, not a stranger, simply independent in a way that looks almost unhuman to those who depend on external reinforcement. But the Sigma is human, fully human, simply built around a quieter architecture. In the next 6 points, we explore why Sigma males are the furthest thing from normal, not as a myth, but as a psychological orientation that is rare, unwavering, and difficult for most people to recognize. Point 1, independence is not rebellion, it is orientation. Most people misunderstand independence. They imagine it as a performance, a declaration, a raised chin that says, I don't need anyone. That is theatrical independence, dramatic, compensatory, and born from an injured ego. When a man has been disappointed, betrayed, or overlooked, he may respond with loud detachment. But that is not genuine freedom. That is emotional scar tissue acting like armor. Sigma independence is quieter. It is foundational. It does not erupt from rejection, nor does it grow from resentment. It emerges from self-sufficiency of identity, a slow internal construction of psychological grounding. The average person calibrates identity through external feedback. They take constant emotional measurements. Am I acceptable? Am I attractive? Am I worthy? Am I ahead or behind? Their behavior is regulated by these fluctuating evaluations. They breathe through the validation of others. Social proof becomes emotional oxygen. Remove that oxygen and they panic, because without applause, their self-image collapses. A Sigma male does not panic. Why? Because he never built his internal architecture around external signals. His sense of direction originates behind his forehead, in introspection, self-knowledge, and self-instruction. He does not ask the world to tell him who he is. He arrives at that understanding privately, and then he moves through life with that conclusion intact. He listens to outcomes, not applause. He cares about alignment, not approval. He respects consequence more than commentary. You cannot coerce a man who already verifies himself internally. You cannot incentivize him with belonging when solitude does not frighten him. That does not make him antisocial or emotionally unavailable. It makes him sovereign, psychologically self-reliant in a culture that depends on emotional interdependence. Sovereignty in the modern world is profoundly abnormal. But in a Sigma's demeanor, there is no rebellion, no performance, and no countercultural dramatics. He does not proclaim his independence. He moves from it. He makes decisions without polling for opinion. He chooses paths without requesting permission. He trusts his personal conviction without waiting for consensus. His independence is not resistance. It is orientation. It is the way he faces the world. He arrived at this state because he understands a simple truth. When you allow the collective to construct your identity, the collective also owns your emotional stability. He refuses that trade. He would rather carry the weight of self-knowledge alone than outsource the burden of meaning to the crowd. This form of independence is not loneliness. It is clarity. It is the recognition that peace does not come from being seen, but from being whole. Point 2. Solitude is a source, not an escape. Normal human psychology treats solitude as deprivation, a lack of stimulation, a lack of affirmation, a lack of life. When a man is alone, he often rushes outward, toward noise, toward the company, toward distraction, because quiet forces him to confront himself, and most men do not want to meet the contents of their own minds. The Sigma does not avoid that confrontation. He gravitates toward it. Solitude is not his punishment. It is his equilibrium. It is the space where thought can breathe, where emotion can settle, where identity can strengthen. Many men speak only to avoid silence. Sigma men speak only when silence has been fully processed. That is why their words carry weight, because they originate from reflection, not impulse. Solitude allows the Sigma to refine emotional responses before expressing them. It allows him to design purpose rather than react to pressure. It allows him to metabolize experience into clarity. A normal man feels erased when nobody's watching him. A Sigma male feels liberated. There is no stage to perform on, no audience to calibrate toward, no reputation to manage, just thought, breath, and direction. His solitude is not escapism, it is maintenance. It is the sharpening of an internal blade that dulls easily under constant social abrasion. Solitude gives him back his edges. It restores distinction in a world that constantly demands conformity. And because his mind is not battered by the expectation of performance, he can examine the deeper structures of his own motives. The average man waits for society to tell him who to be. The Sigma observes himself long enough to discover who he already is. This difference produces a different form of confidence. Not loud, not attention-seeking, but rooted, purposeful. A confidence that does not need witness or applause. For the Sigma, silence becomes a workshop. Stillness becomes an operating room. Reflection becomes an instrument of psychological engineering. He dismantles outdated beliefs, removes emotional debris, and installs a stronger mental framework. So when he re-enters the world, he is not seeking validation, but expressing completion. Other men fear losing relevance if they disappear for too long. The Sigma understands that relevance is a byproduct of substance, and substance is built internally, where no one is watching. That is why he is comfortable withdrawing. That is why he trusts the dark, unobserved spaces of life. Solitude teaches him endurance. It teaches him autonomy. It teaches him that meaning does not require an audience. And when meaning does not require an audience, a man becomes unconquerable. Point 3, leadership. without titles. Hierarchy shapes most male behavior. Who is above, who is below, who controls resources, who commands attention. For most, social positioning is not optional. It is instinctual. Men calibrate tone, posture, ambition, and loyalty based on where they believe they sit within an invisible structure. They chase status because status promises protection. Rank guarantees admiration. It guarantees desirability. It guarantees emotional safety. Validation is the currency of the average man. Without it, he feels exposed. But Sigma males do not seek rank, not because they disdain power, but because they are indifferent to validation. They are not interested in the optics of authority. They're interested in the function of it. If leadership is required, they will lead. If solitude is required, they will disappear. The Sigma male's orientation is inward, toward self-possession, emotional discipline, and mastery. He leads through competence rather than symbolism. A Sigma male's leadership emerges naturally through precision, reliability, calm execution, stability, and emotional regulation. He becomes a psychological anchor in environments where other men are volatile. The hierarchy breeds tension. Men compete, mirror each other, escalate behaviors, and exaggerate strengths. But a Sigma is immune to that magnetic pull. He is unmoved by comparison because his direction does not depend on external evaluation. Where other men crave applause, he craves performance. Where they need witnesses, he needs outcomes. People follow him not because he demands it, but because he exudes certainty. There is no begging, no signaling, and no theatrical projection of strength. His confidence is quiet. His competence is observable. His stability is rare. And because human beings are biologically wired to gravitate toward stability in chaos, the Sigma becomes the unspoken focal point of any group. He is not in competition with the hierarchy. He simply operates parallel to it. In a room full of men trying to prove themselves, the Sigma proves nothing, and that absence of performance becomes its own authority. This restraint communicates something hierarchy-driven men cannot replicate, a lack of psychological need. Hierarchy depends on recognition. It needs an audience to exist. It needs observers, judges, and participants. A Sigma male does not need recognition. He only needs effectiveness. His permission comes from within. His self-worth is not collateralized by approval. That makes him the most stable figure in unstable environments. He cannot be controlled with shame. He cannot be bribed with praise. He cannot be threatened with exclusion. A man who possesses himself fully becomes dangerous, not through aggression, but through ungoverned autonomy. Point 4, emotional regulation before expression. Normal emotional behavior is externalized. People feel, then broadcast. They react, then justify. They seek empathy as a form of emotional outsourcing. But Sigma males internalize before externalizing. Not suppression, processing. They allow emotion to move through internal comprehension before expression. This ability creates emotional neutrality. Not numbness, but steadiness. They do not panic because panic has no utility. They do not rage because rage has no architecture. They do not perform vulnerability to extract comfort. They understand emotion as information, to be interpreted, integrated, and converted into understanding. This is profoundly abnormal in a culture addicted to emotional discharge. A Sigma male feels deeply without bleeding publicly. His restraint confuses those who rely on reaction as proof of humanity. For the Sigma, emotional precision is humanity. In a world where emotional display has become currency, where outrage functions as a badge of participation, and where vulnerability is often leveraged for sympathy rather than growth, the Sigma refuses to participate in the marketplace of emotional theatrics. He does not see expression as a form of performance. He sees it as a responsibility. Every feeling, every impulse is filtered through awareness. Instead of reacting to preserve ego, he responds to preserve clarity. This reflects a psychological truth often overlooked. Emotions are signals, not instructions. Most people translate signals into commands. I'm angry, therefore I must react. I'm hurt, therefore I must demand repair. The Sigma recognizes that emotional impulses may reveal needs, but they do not dictate actions. His internal space acts as an emotional laboratory, studying patterns, isolating triggers, and understanding origin rather than reacting to impact. This internal architecture is not coldness, it is discipline. Emotional neutrality allows him to remain present in moments that destabilize others. He does not escalate conflict unnecessarily because escalation rarely leads to resolution. He does not mirror hostility because mimicry only multiplies chaos. Instead, he observes. Observation grants distance. Distance grants strategy. Strategy grants peace. And peace grants influence. Over time, people around him become unsettled by his quiet. They expect explosions, confessions, and immediate displays of sentiment. When those behaviors never arrive, they mislabel him as detached or arrogant, but they misunderstand the governing principle. The Sigma does not deny emotion. He refuses to weaponize it. He understands that emotional restraint protects relationships, decisions, reputations, and long-term outcomes. It is easier to maintain dignity than repair damage. In this way, emotional precision becomes a rare form of mastery, a refusal to be ruled by transient states. While others waste emotional energy proving their humanity, the Sigma channels his into stability. His emotions still move, still breathe, still ache, but they do so privately, constructively, and intentionally. And that deliberate containment is not a limitation. It is the quiet signature of emotional intelligence. Point 5, depth over visibility. The normal man seeks volume, more friends, more praise, more evidence of connection. The Sigma seeks depth, fewer relationships, deeper resonance, and narrower social bandwidth with higher emotional intimacy. He invests in people slowly because investment requires discernment. He does not diversify emotional capital. He concentrates it. This makes him appear distant, but distance is not rejection, it is filtration. He filters for sincerity, intelligence, loyalty, and psychological calm. Most social interaction is noise. Sigma males remove noise. This is not elitism. It is conservation. Conservation of attention, conservation of emotional effort, conservation of psychological space. The Sigma believes that relationships should not be multiplied, they should be verified. That belief removes him from normality. In a world conditioned to measure worth through social quantity, the Sigma's restraint reads as an anomaly. Society treats visibility as proof of relevance. The Sigma treats invisibility as protection. He is selective not because he fears others, but because he respects the architecture of his own mind. Emotional proximity requires responsibility. If he allows someone near him, that person gains influence, thoughts, emotions, decisions, and even vulnerabilities. The Sigma understands that influence must be earned. He has no interest in becoming psychologically fragmented by a crowd. He knows that too many voices create distortion, and distortion becomes internal conflict. So he keeps his circle small, not out of superiority, but out of psychological hygiene. He is not interested in maintaining relationships through obligation. He prefers those that survive through consistency. If a connection cannot withstand silence, patience, or slow development, It was never aligned with him to begin with. Many interpret his quiet boundaries as emotional coldness, yet the opposite is true. He values warmth so deeply that he protects it from dilution. He would rather offer one unwavering loyalty than scatter partial loyalty across dozens of casual exchanges. There is an honesty to that restraint, an acknowledgement that emotional energy is finite, that attention has a cost, and that intimacy is an investment. The Sigma measures before he offers, listens before he reveals, and observes before he trusts. This slowness unsettles those accustomed to rapid validation. The Sigma does not network. He calibrates. He moves through conversation not to impress, but to understand. If understanding does not emerge, he quietly disengages. Some call it antisocial. In truth, it is anti-fragmentation. The Sigma refuses to fracture himself just to satisfy social custom. He refuses to trade internal clarity for external approval. In doing so, he stands outside the social bell curve, less numerous, less noisy, but far more grounded. And in that grounded posture, his relationships, though few, become profound, durable, and entirely real. Point 6, growth without performance. Modern self-improvement is performative, documented, announced, displayed. People treat progress as an identity they must advertise, attaching value to screenshots, gym selfies, or public declarations. Sigma males do not advertise growth. They embody it. They change habits quietly long before anyone notices. They refine weaknesses silently, without attachment to applause or validation. They study without praise, because knowledge is nourishment, not a marketing tool. They evolve without proclamation, because growth is internal work, not a theatrical production staged for social approval. Their improvement is not meant to impress anyone. It is meant to strengthen alignment. Normal men treat achievement as proof, something to hold up like a certificate of worth. Sigma males treat achievement as calibration, a subtle adjustment of trajectory, and a way of ensuring their inner compass remains precise. If it reinforces self-direction, they continue. If it does not, they discard it. There is no sentimentality in their process, only refinement. Their evolution is stripped of ego, free from competition, and free from expectation. That is why it is consistent, sustainable, and quietly unstoppable. This is why Sigma males remain the furthest thing from normal. They are not mystical. They are not detached from humanity. They are simply unwilling to outsource identity, emotion, or purpose. And in a world that depends heavily on external scaffolding, internal scaffolding looks unrecognizable.